And the Interact Network is part of the Made Smarter Innovation Programme. And Made Smarter Innovation is all about how do we kind of build a more competitive digital manufacturing sector in the UK. So Made Smarter Innovation, funded by UK government through UKRI, and a lot of investment, over £200 million has been put in to Made Smarter Innovation, to help kind of come up with new digital technologies and to encourage the kind of adoption of these technologies in the manufacturing sector. Now, a lot of what's going on in Made Smarter Innovation is about the technologies themselves. But where Interact is different is Interact is looking at the more human elements of digital change. So Interact is more interacting, if you like, with the social science researchers, but also with people from industry and people who are developing these industrial digital technologies. So at Interact, we're encouraging people to work together to interact and bringing together researchers from both the social sciences and the kind of engineering and physical sciences. But we also work with manufacturers and digital technology providers. So that's what Interact's about. I'll give you more information towards the end. We'd love to see more of you get involved in some of our activities. But we're doing this webinar with a partner, and this time it's with Foods Connected. And Foods Connected, as you read here, an organisation that works largely with the food industry and food supply chains. But it is about these digital technologies and the software that helps run these complex supply networks. And I first came across Foods Connected because they were involved in the overall Made Smarter Innovation Programme. And they had been working with a number of companies to develop technologies that worked in this particular sector. So we decided we would do an event together, and it looks as if that's worked quite well, certainly given the number of people that have registered to attend this event. And I've got one other introduction to make, and one of our panelists today, Lorelei, is part of Made Smarter Innovation because she works for Innovate UK KTN, who run the Made Smarter Innovation Network. So you can see here that the Made Smarter Innovation Network is all about linking all these things together. And really what Lorelei does is she's much more at the side that's looking at the industry facing side. So we'll hear more from Lorelei today. But for just now, we've got a great panel. I'm not so much the panel. I'm Jill. I'm going to be asking the questions. But on our panel, we've got I'm going to start with you, Lorelei. So Lorelei Gherman is a knowledge transfer manager, and she works in the advanced manufacturing team at Innovate UK KTN. Now, Lorelei is quite new into her job. She's new joining this team, but she's part of the Industrial Technologies and Manufacturing team, working with the Made Smarter Innovation Network. So I'm sure I'm going to see a lot more of Lorelei in the coming months. But by background, Lorelei herself is a manufacturing engineer. She did a lot in precision and micro engineering, bioengineering, and non-conventional machining. But she's had about 14 years of R&D experience and has worked on research projects and industry projects funded by people like ERDF. And she's done a lot of work across the West Midlands, working with enterprises and with bodies there. And she's only a few months into the job with Innovate UK KTN. So welcome, Lorelei. And then our other panelist is which is where I kind of started my journey with Foods Connected, is Stephanie Brooks. And Stephanie is Senior Implementation Manager at Foods Connected. And I've already said Foods Connected is a technology company that builds software and solutions that help people within the food sector. Now, Stephanie tells me that her first degree was in food science, and she's always loved food and still loves food. But she worked in industry, she worked in academia, she's worked with tech, but everything that she's done has always been related to food and agriculture, but just from different angles and perspectives. And as I say, I kind of came across her because of the work she'd been doing with Innovate UK funded project. And that was where she was working on a project called Trace Connected. And Trace Connected was something that took a few years in the making, I believe, but it was funded by Innovate UK, and it's all about reducing risk and cost and giving real-time access and traceability information to people within the food sector. So I'm sure Stephanie will tell us a bit more about that today. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to look at people's faces and I'm going to ask some questions, if that's okay with everybody. We'll make a start and Liam can jump in, but I'm going to ask a few questions. And I guess the first question that I'm going to ask is, I'm enthusiastic about digital transformation in manufacturing, but I probably know less than you guys do about the food sector. So I'll maybe start by asking Lorelei and Stephanie to pitch in this one is, why is digital transformation important within the food sector and particularly agri-food? Stephanie, do you want to start that one?
Yeah, thank you. I think, if we think about the agri-food industry, it's very dispersed. There is many different actors. There's many different parts of the supply chain. And if we think about it in terms of manufacturing, it's the largest manufacturing sector within the UK if you consider sales value. So it's hugely significant. Every human has an innate need to eat. Therefore, we can never walk away from the idea that the agri-food industry is essential to everyone's well-being. But I think, when we think about the disparity of the supply chain in terms of how many different actors there are, if we think about farms, how many different types of farms, how many numbers of farms there are, there's this sort of huge disparity. So we definitely have a big journey when it comes to digitization within agri-food. But I think if we're thinking about it in the future, we're really looking at digitization now for provisioning for the future. And if we think about it now, yeah, absolutely, we should definitely be digitizing in that there is so much data. It's a really data rich sector. And that's a result of having to legislatively collect data on traceability, for example. But there's also much value in the agri-food industry where data can give you great insights. And I think as we move into the future, we're really in this new era of Industry 4.0, which is all about smart autonomous processes within manufacturing. And really, to be able to avail of those Industry 4.0 initiatives or opportunities, such as artificial intelligence, we really need to be digital. Being digital is a prereq to allow you to be able to avail of those technologies. What you don't want to do is you don't want to be missing out on those because you haven't necessarily digitized. And digitizing now obviously does bring you benefit in that, you can understand data-driven management or data-driven insights into your business. And I think what it does is really helps us pave the way to the future in terms of being able to optimize value in our supply chains. And all of that's really going to come from data-driven insight.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. Lorelei, anything to add to that?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you very much, Stephanie, for setting the context. So as Stephanie said, the food and drink manufacturing sector is the largest, but also the most geographically diverse manufacturing sector. There will be challenges that will pertain to the general production challenges, which digitalization can easily address, such as robotics and automation. And then there would be specific food and drink and agricultural challenges. And this can really be addressed with innovation. So with new development, emerging technologies that can help not just data-driven technologies, but also manipulation, production, so the actual physical hardware that can enable us to deliver safer food, an improved food ecosystem, and also to address some needs for raw ingredients, energy costs, and address the quality of the food to decrease the chance of any diet-related illnesses that can appear in time. So we are looking to create solutions for the modern food system, which digital technologies can achieve. And within Innovate UK, within the knowledge transfer network, what we are aiming to do is connect the different businesses, communities, ideas, so government funding, research that can help the third sector achieve innovation and adopt the digital technologies to increase productivity, to increase food safety, quality, and to achieve overall great society benefits.
Sounds good. Where are we in our journey? I mean, Stephanie, you said we've got a way to go. In terms of agri-food, are they quite far on in the digital journey, or are they a slower starter than some sectors, do you think?
I think, we're talking, I suppose, in general terms here, probably the agri-food industry has always been traditionally slower to adopt technology, whether that's digital technology or a physical technology or whatever it happens to be. There's always kind of been a level of, I wouldn't say hesitancy, but maybe reservation, and partially because a consequence of it being, as Lorelei alluded to already, it's a very diverse sector in that it tends to operate on a very high volume, low margin model. So, in terms of investment and capital expenditure into new technologies, it tends to be very, very decision oriented in terms of, what's the best return on investment for that technology for me as a business. If I think about it generally, there's a couple of points on this, in that if you consider the whole supply chain, there's parts of that supply chain that are maybe a little bit further on in their digital journey than other parts. So typically what we would see is those who are downstream, so manufacturers, retailers, food service operators, being a little bit further on in their digital journey than those upstream actors in, like, again, if we think about the disparity and the diversity of primary production, like farms, growers, etc. There's a huge disparity and there's a huge number of them. So I think if we think about it in that way, we're probably at certain parts of our supply chain, we're a little bit further on. And then the second point really is that within those organizations that are a little bit more digitally mature and further on in their journey, where again, there's a level of disparity in terms of what the digital maturity within those organizations. What we would find a lot is you'll have enterprise resource planning systems in play in a lot of these facilities and a lot of these parts of the supply chain to help manage things like, goods inwards, or the procurement piece, or how you dispatch a product out the other side, sort of keeping track of almost the financial side of the business. But what we find is it tends to be less digitally mature when it comes to things like batching or product transformation or management of suppliers. Those tend to be a little bit more manual. And that's, I suppose, where we as a business really sort of focus our effort in terms of how we actually digitize those parts of the supply chain, like, the batching, the raw material transformation, the supplier management, the specification management. So there's a few points in there that there's definitely parts of the supply chain that are a little bit more digitally mature, and also just the aspects within their businesses that are further along in the digitization journey than other aspects. So we are getting there, slowly but surely, but we are getting there.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. We'll
Should I
move on.
contribute with some of the barriers? Yes,
That would
because
be great, Lorelei.
digitalization is such a new, so I'm a manufacturing engineer, I deal with digitalization on a daily basis. So some of the barriers we see from adopting innovation are the exact same barriers that we see in adopting digitalization. So as an engineer, whenever you get some new equipment, you need to get your staff trained, upskilled to a certain level. So there's definitely a lot of traditional businesses that would work in the manufacturing, specifically in food and drink manufacturing, with traditional equipment, with traditional, even paper-based method of collecting data or keeping quality check. So there is definitely a knowledge and a communication upskill needed in order for the staff to adopt digitalization. So, but there are ways to address this. There are ways for businesses to get support in upskilling their staff, in getting training programs. there's definitely, whenever something is new, even in our private day-to-day life, for example, when there's a new technology we introduce, do you remember when we got smartphones, like 10, 15, 20 years ago? So there's definitely a reluctance sometimes to adopt new technologies. It's one thing for your personal life, but it definitely can impact your business more. So you need to see it validated. You need to see it working for other companies. You need to know that it is worth the investment. In a way, you don't want to be one of the early adopters that takes a risk, especially as a food and drink manufacturing SME. You will have a limited budget you can work with. So in this case, we can support with case studies. And although there is a reluctance sometimes to adopt innovation, I think it's the hardest to try to do the first project once you start receiving support from innovation agencies, from research centers and innovation hubs such as Interact. You get support on your way, on your roadmap to adopting digitalization and innovation in your company. So anything that is new can be quite intimidating in every job, in every company, but it is important for businesses to know that there is a lot of support available and it is free for businesses.
That's very true, Lorelei, and you've given me a wee in there. So within the Interact network, I'm also involved in the Future of Manufacturing Work theme, and we've just done a survey, and we've got nearly 300 responses from manufacturers who are telling us about their digital journey. And some of the things you've said exactly is what they're telling us. It's about that reticence, about uncertainty about the technology, it's about cost. And the other thing they're saying is it's also about not having the capacity to free people up to do the training. So
so
that's
it's
probably
not sometimes skills, it's capacity to build in the training, to upskill people. Yes, that's a very good point.
So that's possibly a whole other webinar. But for just now, maybe go back to the kind of the benefits of going more digital. And I know you've both been working with a lot of companies who have made the journey. So maybe tell us a little bit about, some examples of where you've really seen companies benefit from digitalization. Stephanie, do you want to kick that one off?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, from our perspective, we work with a range of companies in the agri-food space. We meet companies, fresh produce companies, a whole range, right from retailers all the way to manufacturers, processors. And I think, for us, we broadly will sort of break up in terms of what we offer in terms of, certain benefits is on the technical and quality side, but also on the supply chain optimization side. So I think it's probably a good idea to sort of give you a few examples of where we've sort of helped in that space in relation to both of those. So, on the technical quality side, we have a range of tools, supplier management, specification management, auditing management. And really what these tools do is allow customers of ours to digitize traditionally manual processes. And, there's one particular use case or case study coming to mind is that there's a manufacturer of, vegan products, venison, Wagyu beef, really high-end premium products. And what their struggle was around supplier management, and that being a really administrative heavy task. And when we're talking about supplier management, we're talking about, bringing them on as an approved supplier, making sure they have all the correct certifications. So whether that be Red Tractor or making sure they have all their BRC certificates up to date. And that was a really, really manual process for them, which took huge amounts of time to make sure that they were monitoring compliancy correctly. But also what it done was it didn't allow them to really trend data or trend by supplier, or non-conformances by supplier, for example. So what we did is we went in and we worked with them. And this is probably one of the things that Foods Connected really pride ourselves on, is that about half of the people that work for Foods Connected are from the agri-food industry. And, at some point we'll have experienced the same pain points that you have on this journey. And, so that's something that we kind of offer as part of our service. We don't just say, here's a tool, go and implement it. We really work on that, implementation with you. And what we done for this particular company was we actually digitized their supplier management and also their auditing. So when it comes to supplier management, what it did was it allowed them to more effectively manage their suppliers through things like requesting information from them through the platform. automating how you can, I suppose, look at suppliers in terms of what they're not compliant with or what they are compliant with, and gives you a lot of visualization that would normally not be visible on the basis that information maybe resided on an Excel spreadsheet or on paper. And I think one of the things that we're really proud about, particularly in this case study, was that, you know, we asked them, you know, if you could describe Foods Connected in 3 words, one of them said makes life easier. And I think that really just hit the nail on the head as to they really were vastly able to reduce their administrative burden that was associated with managing suppliers and also conducting factory floor audits. So they now can go and conduct those factory floor audits on a mobile enabled device. And that significantly helps them. In terms of, you know, our supply chain side as well, we've got really good examples again of we do a lot of supply chain optimization work with meat companies because again, really low margin business, and really what you're trying to do is making sure that you're making really good evidence-based decisions for your highest returns, and you know, make sure there's not any waste in there, there's not any essentially wrong decisions or bad decisions that weren't necessarily informed by data that can actually cost businesses quite a lot of money. And, you know, this one particular example I'm thinking of is that we now, by digitising kind of their purchasing negotiations and how they communicated between their suppliers on how they negotiated contracts and pricing and things like that there, but also internally within their own business as to how they managed the communications for things like demand planning or production scheduling based on raw materials that were coming into site. What they actually did was they actually streamlined their communication, streamlined their admin piece, where they actually were achieving about a 25% reduction on admin. So I think, you know, when we talk about case studies and we talk about them, we want to be able to demonstrate tangible benefits. You know, for example, there was a cost saving that was associated with it. So while I might invest in this technology, I can see a tangible cost saving that it benefits me or helps me direct activities of employees towards more value adding activities rather than administrative resource heavy activities. And then the final one, just to, I suppose, to draw back to, is just where I suppose how Jill and I came in contact was the Innovate UK Made Smart Innovation funded project Trace Connected. And that was a really long work in progress. It was an over 2-year project. And what we did was, that was a POC that we developed where we actually achieved interoperable traceability. And what I mean by that is traceability is a relatively laboursome activity that has to be conducted within the food industry legislatively. There's absolutely no choice in it. You have to do it. But what happens is it could take 4 or 5, several hours for one facility to maybe conduct a traceability exercise. And that's partially a consequence of not necessarily being digital, so some of that information being manual, and also a consequence of you might have maybe 3, 4, 5 different systems at play within one facility. So you're having to run reports from all these different systems, and then you create a pack or a traceability pack that's essentially a printout of a whole pile of paper. And what that does is that takes a significant amount of time. So this project allowed us really to demonstrate how we can actually essentially house all that information and bring it into one system to reduce your trace time from hours to 2 seconds. And that was something that I think, you know, in terms of talking about that value added piece, you know, there's technical managers and quality managers that spend probably half a day a week, maybe even a day a week running traceability exercises. If you can take that resource burden away from them and put it in and systemize it and make it much more efficient, that's a person there that can go on and do more value adding activities within a business.
Great, some really good examples there, Stephanie. Anything you want to add to that one, Lorelei, before I move to my next question?
Yes, so I wanted to say, just to explain a little bit what Innovate UK does. So we are the government's research agency. So we support innovation development, but also innovation adoption. So the way the government does this through Innovate UK is it has a wing that gives grants for businesses, and also it has a knowledge transfer network where I sit as a knowledge transfer manager who connects the grants with the businesses, with the local authorities, with service providers. So some of the case studies within the Made Smart Innovation Program, they are from grants that have been won through the Made Smarter program, and they have delivered an increase in productivity, resilience, quality. So, for example, we worked with an agriculture machine manufacturer, and they wanted to develop their production processes using automation and robotics. So this is very heavy duty, heavy engineering. Their machinery was for slurry management. So through the grants they received through Made Smarter, they got 2 projects. One was a robotic welder, and that had a profound impact on productivity, upskilling staff, and unlocking R&D opportunities. And secondly, they had an automatic cutting machine, and once installed, this enabled for the first time in the company a lights out manufacturing process. So that was a huge boost for the business growth. Secondly, we work not just with equipment machinery, but also with food producers. So there are award-winning artisan producers of healthy food who started from a passion for food and cooking and developing over years high-quality, healthy products like dried foods and nuts, and they wanted to expand their product range. Whenever it's a micro business, like a family business, and you want to expand, realistically, you're going to understand how can you scale up. So from the admin and customer service point of view, the founder adopted material requirement planning, MRP, software-based system, and this enabled them to increase productivity. And thirdly, if you're just thinking about food production, a manufacturer for food, for example, like a potato manufacturer, they won a grant on quality control process, reduced waste, exactly like Stephanie presented some of the work on Foods Connected. So they switched from this type of paper-based quality check process, manual process, to a bespoke ERP solution. So they went from paper to handheld tablets and real-time visualization of the factory data. And that enabled them to rapidly identify, communicate, and react to quality issues. So their productivity used to be around 1,000 tons of potatoes per week. And just within the first 6 months of operations, those solutions enabled them to reduce the returns from customers by thousands of kilos. So a huge upturn in productivity and quality. And in addition to this, companies generally receiving grants through collaborative research and development that we can introduce you to can be top sandwich makers, cold storage solutions, homeopathic remedies, agri-food data marketplace, suppliers of meat. So a huge range of agri-food companies.
That's brilliant, Lorelei. So you've kind of given us some good examples there, but you've also told us some of the doors we could knock on. I mean, one I've been involved in myself that's Innovate UK as well is the knowledge transfer partnerships. So again, that's a good way for kind
and
of
that
small.
is organized by Innovate UK
Yeah.
to enable academia and businesses to collaborate on innovation bespoke for that company.
Yeah, so I've worked with food companies, and I guess it has been digital projects, perhaps implementing new technology on the shop floor. So yeah, great. Thank you for that. Okay, going back to some of the barriers, you've told us some of the good stories there. Maybe tell us a couple of stories about companies where they saw a barrier and you've helped them overcome it. So has anybody got a situation where maybe a company didn't have the resource or didn't know the technology to go for, and any way that you've seen them get over these barriers?
Yeah, I suppose, again, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more generally, in that, yes, like we will, as a technology provider and, as in my role in implementation, we're always seeing barriers. And some of those barriers will be, process related. So a technology that has a use case in somewhere else might not have always a direct use case within agri-food. And that might be a consequence of things like, agri-food processes are really, really tightly controlled. Again, back to this idea of a low margin business, you can't really afford to make mistakes. And what the food industry and what the agri-food industry don't want is almost a technology that isn't really adaptable or configurable in a way that works for their processes. And I think, from our perspective, that's something we're really, really conscious of, in that. And I think technology providers in general should be really conscious of, just because there's a use case of that technology somewhere else, it isn't always that technology will fit within the agri-food industry. So part of it is, technology providers need to be able to almost reinvent the wheel slightly, very much with the viewpoint of agri-food in mind. And whatever, in terms of their that baseline technology, in terms of, I'll talk about an example in a minute and to contextualize it, but a little bit, that you have to be able to, the solutions that you provide have to be configurable to not just agri-food sector in general, but also businesses, because one business will do something quite differently to another. So your technology really has to be flexible and adaptable to allow that to happen. And if I think about one example, probably most people on this webinar will have heard about blockchain and blockchain revolutionizing the food industry, particularly around the traceability and the fraud perspective and the compliance perspective. And I think it absolutely does have a use case, but I think in its traditional legacy form, it doesn't really lend itself to a high volume, low margin sector, because it tends to be quite an expensive technology in its current, or in its its truly authentic blockchain form. And that's really because it's, based on a sort of transaction-based pricing model, and that results in quite high costs for food manufacturers or food business operators. And that's a prime example of where you can adapt the technology like blockchain to make it more fit for purpose for the food industry, while pertaining to all the great parts about blockchain in terms of, its cryptographic ledger and its cryptographic signatures, and allow how you submit something to the ledger and then it's cryptographically secure. You can do all those things, but you can reinvent the technology in a what we would call a centralized way, where that is a facility that allows you to keep cost in a much more attainable region for the food industry. So cost in general, and that adaptability of technology to fit within the agri-food sector in general, but also within businesses to allow configurations to accommodate for process differences or, productivity differences. Again, a lot of it really is, what do they need to benefit out of the technology? Everyone's value proposition and everyone's value they can generate potentially from a technology is going to be different. So it's really, really important that, technology providers are able to provide technology that's adaptable and solutions that can be configured.
That's music to my ears, Stephanie. I mean, in Interact, we're very much about you've got to think about the human aspects as well. And it's not just because your neighbour has adopted certain technologies, doesn't necessarily mean it's for you. It's about looking at your business, looking at the people and your skill set and the industry, the part of the industry you're in. Lorelei, anything to add to that before we go to questions?
About barriers.
Yeah.
So I think in engineering we use a method called 6M. So it's man, method, manufacture, environment. So there's something to define a barrier for each of these parts. Certainly working in business support, I see a barrier from trying to translate innovation from academia to businesses. So sometimes there may be funding and they may be available, it may be organized on one-to-one support or workshop-based work, but it really has to be accessible to the wider sector. It has to be an accessible training format. It has to suit the needs of the sector, not necessarily what the academic needs. And realistically, innovation should address 80% of industrial challenges and maybe 20% blue sky thinking. So that is, in general, a barrier for innovation. But what can happen? So by connecting academia with local government, who are very good at knowing what are some of the areas for support, is it skills, is it equipment, is it net zero? There is a lot of support available for businesses on this journey. So they don't need to understand everything. They can have bespoke support. It is important to be adaptable. Some support will be beneficial for micro businesses, so some for small enterprises and some for medium businesses. So we need to adapt to, is it a scale-up solution? Is it a challenge relating staffing? Yes. Is the challenge relating the actual technology? Can you invest in this cost, and is there any grant that can help you support that? So we are solution providers because we are looking to connect you with a way to solve your innovation challenges, your upskilling challenges, your solution challenges. So there is a resource available for businesses to tap in for every challenge they may have.
That's great. My final question before I was going to ask questions was, where do people start? So are you suggesting, Lorelei, that they start by thinking about the nature of their problem and then looking at maybe some of the funding that's available? Is that
Yes, but it can be quite tiresome, especially as it's spread across manufacturing, food and drink, machinery, productivity. So Innovate UK has many sector teams, so agri-foods, manufacturing, net zero, energy, very various ones. So for example, by subscribing to something like a newsletter, the Made Smart Innovation newsletter, they would get up-to-date grant notifications for whatever a research center innovation hub like Interact Smart Manufacturing Data Hub would be putting out, for example, £50,000 to adopt some type of machinery. Likewise, through LinkedIn, we promote a lot of current opportunities, so very up-to-date information. So by subscribing to Innovate UK and Knowledge Transfer Network information, they would get updated, fast, rapidly changing information. Additionally, they can get support from contacting us, and we can refer them directly to our teams, agri-foods, manufacturing, net zero, because there will be a specialist within the government's research agency to support this all. And our role is to connect businesses with solutions, and whether this is a solution provider, a grant, a local government, or academic. So we are happy to be the referring point. Our main mission and goal is to connect businesses with solutions.
That's great. And I'm going to ask the same question to Stephanie about what she would say the starting point should be. And maybe Lorelei, you could put in the chat link, your LinkedIn details or how to contact you directly.
Perfect.
Stephanie,
Yeah.
anything? How would you start?
Just to echo a few points that Lorelei said, was like absolutely in terms of funding streams. I think generally within the agri-food industry, there's sort of, people aren't necessarily always aware that there is opportunity there in terms of looking at funding streams to help de-risk. For example, the financial risk of being an early adopter sometimes will be enough to put the brakes on. And I think sometimes, not necessarily knowing that there is these opportunities to avail of. And I think it's great that we can continue to get the word out. From our perspective, we were very heavily involved in Made Smart Innovation, and we got some funding to allow us to explore a new technology application within agri-food. And that certainly from our perspective and our partners' perspective de-risked a lot of the financial risk and investment that would have to be put into by each business to allow us to really explore the adoption of this technology. And the second point is really just around a lot of, I think as a business, and I think if you're looking and exploring digital technology, it's really, really important to understand where there's going to be various parts of your business where you can say, oh, I can see that there's going to be value here, or there could be potential value here. But a starting point is look at the one that has the most value to gain. That value doesn't have to necessarily be profit. It could be cost reduction. It could be allowing you to direct resource into a different area of the business. It could be anything, but it's from your business perspective. Where do you have the most to gain in that value? What is your overriding value proposition that you would maybe want technology to help you with? And I think if you've got a really good starting point, whether that's Foods Connected or other technology providers, they should be really in a position to actually really help and understand, okay, what value do you want to generate from digital technology? And, I know certainly from our perspective, we've got about 26 different tools. So there'll probably be a tool in there in our toolkit that can certainly help in terms of, where you can leverage that value. So the first step is really, what's my value? And really then doing your homework and understanding who as technology providers can help you on that journey.
Fantastic, Stephanie. And I think you've got a bit of telepathy going, because I'm looking at some of the questions in the chat. And the first question from Stephen was asking about, from your experience, do you think that the level of Industry 4 adoption in agriculture is all but profit-led over other criteria? And Stephen's saying, for instance, from the income levels of farmers, dairy and cereal production, is it all profit related, or are they looking at investing in digital for other reasons, like the people, I'm guessing? So you kind of jumped in and almost answered that before we'd even got to it. But
yeah, But sorry, go ahead, Lorelei.
Yeah, so there is of course cost will be the main concern, but there is also there will be funding and support to adopt whatever government strategy is out there. For example, net zero. So a lot of digitalization will be to just net zero, to reduce emissions, to get more up-to-date equipment that can help with traceability, to improve food quality. So there is a lot that is done, and it's not always profits led, although that is one of the main criteria for any business because they need to make a living.
Yeah. And I think just, as an industry, and I know, for example, other parts of the industry or other sectors within the agri-food industry, some will be more profitable than others. And I think really it's about, I mean, generally we're a low margin business based on high volume output. And I think, just to echo a little bit about what Lorelei said, yes, cost and profit absolutely comes into it. And I think that's because, again, as an industry, generally we can't afford to be making mistakes. And if data and if, digital technologies can help alleviate some of those maybe more human-led mistakes, then there is definitely, a justification for doing those things. But the other thing is this whole circular economy piece and being able to use digital technologies to quantify your net zero and say, okay, well, these are my inputs and these are my outputs. And maybe, artificial intelligence, we've talked about that. It has a place in some of this as well in terms of, how does our artificial AI systems essentially can analyze large amounts of data much more precisely than humans. But what it does is it then gives enough information to humans to allow them to make a human-led decision. And I think the human bit has to come back into it.
But that's a really interesting space as well about digital for more sustainable businesses, really important. Probably related to that, James has got a question in the chat. How do emerging technologies in smart packaging and IoT monitoring impact on the agri-food sector? Anybody got any thoughts on that? It's maybe quite a specific question.
I would say it has huge potential in that I wouldn't say it's impact. Or if it's impact, it's positive impact. In that, if we look at towards the aspirations of Industry 4.0, things like IoT sensors or smart monitoring devices are going to become hugely significant and again, I don't want to keep bringing it back to the same point, but we are now in a space where, it's not enough to turn around and say, as a manufacturer or a producer or a retailer, that, yep, I'm net zero. These are the things that I'm doing. You have to be able to prove your compliancy. So things like IoT monitors or smart meters, those things are going to become incredibly important to be able to validate the claims that you're making on the sustainability side. So, for example, if you're a producer, if you're a manufacturer of red meat, and red meat probably unfairly gets maybe a bit of a bad reputation on the sustainability side, but those types of businesses are going to have to start being able to quantify and prove that they are adhering to net zero or sustainable based practices. And things like smart metering and IoT devices, even things like livestock wearables, which are IoT devices, those things are all going to become really, really hugely important in the agri-food sector. And how we bring all that information together, all those different inputs to essentially give you a quantifiable output on the basis of some form of standardized approach within the industry. So emerging technologies in these areas are going to become hugely impactful in a positive way, I think, in the food industry.
Absolutely. I think this next one from Chuck's question is probably for you, Lorelei. He says, yes. Is the funding opportunities available for startups only or already established businesses?
So Chuck's very many different types of funding streams, very many different sources. So there will be some available for every type of organization. For example, government support from Innovate UK is mostly aimed at SMEs and it has various levels of, and I put an example in the chat that is closing today in agri-foods that would support SMEs. And depending on the size of the company, it would support, for example, a small company by 60%, a medium enterprise by 50%, and a large enterprise by 40%. So it depends on the level of funding needed. There are grants given directly by the research center and innovation hubs that are available for SMEs. There is very specific type of funding related to startups from catapults. For example, digital catapult, high-value manufacturing catapult, energy systems catapult, through different programs that they have organized. So there is a funding opportunity available for every type of business. They do come out regularly. Some are one-off grants, for example, the ones organized by some of the research centers, and some that are organized, for example, by Innovate UK, they will come regularly. And depending on the type, it would be once a year, twice a year, and depending on the market size for that type of business. So there is, I think Jillian maybe is sharing. Yes, sorry. I was thinking you were sharing potentially the grants. So there would be a grant given by the government. There are grants from research centers, and then there is also grant funding from local enterprise partnerships, so from councils. These tend to be more related to, for example, adoption of net zero emission reduction technology. So you would up to 10K grant in adopting some solution to reduce your emissions. So there are funding, and then there is funding available for startups in helping with on the commercialization process. So bringing your idea from concept to prototype to market. So that's why the catapults are involved in developing a certain idea from a low technology readiness level to a more mature technology readiness level. So you have options for different sizes of business and on different industrial sectors.
Thanks, Lorelei. And Lorelei's very helpfully put some stuff in the chat. She's put her own contact details and how to link to find out more about different grant streams. So I put my slides back on again to give you Stephanie's contact details, which you should be able to see on the slide just now. And the last one is Interact. As I say, we would love to see more of you get involved in Interact. We do research, we give out small grants, we encourage early career researchers, for example. So if you're interested in finding out more about Interact, we're just interact-hub.org on that's our website, or join us on LinkedIn. Our details are there.